Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. Now, this week, we've got a very special episode with the team behind Playtime, a show that is going to explore, amongst other things, life in school and neurodivergence. Now, I won't spoil the episode, but suffice to say that as soon as we had recorded the episode, ITV decided to change the details. And so instead of all the references to a Monday evening sort of launch, we will now be able to access on Sunday. And so Playtime will be released on Sunday, the 9th of November, but available to watch on ITVX and YouTube from 7 a.m. Sunday morning. And it'll be shown at 11:20 p.m. on Sunday night. Interesting decision by ITV there, because anyone who's interested or has children or is involved in schools will not be awake at 11:20 p.m. on a Sunday night. But who am I? I hope you enjoy the episode. The first bit, we're going to show a clip from the show. So if you're watching the video, it makes it easy to see, but hopefully you get a sense from the sound exactly what's happening. Really interesting episode. Do check out the show, because it's, if nothing else, really heartwarming and I think taking the conversation in the direction that we would hope it might go. So without further ado, let's spend some time thinking deeply about primary education.
Myself and 5 other performers who are neurodivergent arrived at school this morning with the task of putting on a play. We had absolutely no idea what this play was going to be about, because all the ideas came from the writers who are sitting here in the front row.
So we're going to come up with a location.
We're going to need some fantastic characters.
What's their catchphrase?
A group of primary school pupils gave us all the ideas for the play.
Teethland.
Did you say Teethland?
I don't like trees.
You don't like trees?
Bike attack convenient. Powers like laser eyes. Then the giraffe goes to Aston Villa.
Then it was our job to put all those ideas together.
Do you want to do a quick rehearsal in 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'll just write the story. We have had not a lot of time.
5 minutes to go. 5 minutes.
Wow.
I have ADHD. Why would you put me in front of so many things and give me a time limit?
Please put your hands together for the world premiere of...
Ian and Andy, it's lovely to have you today, guys. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
It's a pleasure. Now, we're going to explore a show that's released in a couple of days' time called Playtime, which you guys are heavily involved in. But I thought it would make sense to begin with a little bit about who you are and how you got here today.
Yeah, of course. So, so I'm Céin McGillicuddy. I'm a television writer-director. I make a lot of scripted comedy, as well as unscripted shows, and sort of cross the unholy divide in television, because generally speaking, you do one or the other, but I've somehow managed to straddle the two over the years, which is great fun. And it means I've done a very eclectic mix. And in particular, a show done very recently is The Assembly on ITV, where 30 or so neurodivergent people, autistic and learning disabled people, interview a celebrity. And then Andy is a good friend of mine. We worked together for about 20 years or so since meeting at university. And Andy, I'll let you tell everyone a bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I'm thank you, mate. I'm Andy Kinnear, and I'm a freelance television editor and writer. So I write with Céin. We collaborate together. We write a lot of scripted comedy together. But as an editor, I mainly work in scripted comedy. I've been freelance for 15 years, editing kind of all sorts across all channels and all production companies. And as Céin said, we met at university, started writing stuff together. And in terms of comedy, we wrote a show called Top Coppers back in 2015. That was our first kind of major show, and we've just been collaborating ever since.
I mean, when you look at your timeline on your website, Andy, you get these fantastic run of shows from like maybe 2009-ish. And it really is eclectic. Everything up to Takeshi's Castle, which is obviously a classic. I don't know how involved you were in that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that when that came back. That was great with Romesh and Tom Davis. It was that was a really fun one to cut. Actually, that was good.
Nice. Yeah. So I mean, I haven't seen the assembly, but I'm aware of it. I mean, was there an Australian version? Because I saw a clip with Sam Neill talking to a young person.
Yes.
Is that the same show, or is it?
It's a French format. It was these French film directors that developed it initially, and then it's gone out into lots of other territories. And so I've directed the UK version. But yes, there was an Australian version with Sam Neill. I watched that episode as well. Before I came on to the UK version, I went and watched about 7 or 8 of the international versions to see what they did, which is very interesting to see different takes on it. And it varies very much from country to country, but like the ethos is the same, ultimately, which is people just talking and having very sort of stripped back, raw conversations. So they obviously have a celebrity on, but they are the nature of it, because everybody, the questioning is so sincere. There's no ulterior motive like behind any of the questioning. It's not like in a typical interview where you feel like this journalist is maybe trying to catch them out or something and trying to get a headline. There's none of that. It's just so honest and so sincere and very good natured that it just means the celebrity has no choice than just to strip away all the sheen and answer the question sincerely back, because it's like, I can't not. It's just such a sincere question. I can't not answer it sincerely. So you get this beautifully sort of just human response from these celebrities that are, without any of that usual training that they've done there, or their media training. They know the right things to say, not to say. And it tends to all just sort of, fall away, and you get to just see the real them. And it's as much about the people asking the questions as the celebrity. It's not all about the celebrity. You get an insight into these other people and their lives, and it's all about human connection, and there's something incredibly kind of raw and satisfying about it.
The bits that I did watch were incredibly heartwarming, so I mean, I probably should follow up more on that. And it feels like Playtime is a natural evolution. I don't know if you guys want to set the scene. What when we're talking about Playtime, what are we talking about in particular?
Andy, do you want to go for it, shall I?
So the basic premise of Playtime is that 6 neurodivergent comedians go to a primary school with the aim of putting on a play for the whole school when the bell rings at 3:30. When they arrive, they have no idea what the play is going to be about or what any of the characters or story is going to be until they interview a group of neurodiverse 6 to 8-year-olds from the primary school. So they sit down in pairs and they interview the children and gain all the characters, all the ideas, all the stories and the settings, and then they have a very, very narrow window of around about an hour to write the play, create the props, create the costumes, create some original songs, and then they perform the play in front of the school, and importantly in front of the children whose ideas they collected, and their parents. So the children and the parents are all on the front row watching their ideas come to life. So they get to see the characters and the stories that they came up with only a couple of hours earlier performed live in front of them. So that's the premise of the show.
And that's on the 10th of what month are we in now?
November. Yeah.
We're not yet, are we? That's why I can remember. So that's 10th November. And it sounds really, really interesting. What did it reveal about the nature of creativity and collaboration? I suppose it seems like everyone's way of thinking is valued equally, almost underpins this sort of approach.
For me, so there's often a lot of like emphasis on what's considered like good art or bad art. I just, not necessarily in education, but in the world, everyone thinks in those terms. People are always criticizing films. Is it a good film or is it a bad film? Is it a good song or is it a bad song? And so art has been very kind of somewhat sort of tainted in that way, because it gets thought of in those almost commercial kind of terms, so much that you kind of get away from the real purpose of art, like especially like for children, because it's all about development. It's about they need to feel free from judgment when they're conceiving of things. Otherwise, you risk kind of stifling all of that like vital self-expression by introducing like consciousness and fear of rejection. So it's so integral. It was really integral for us to create like a level playing field where like no idea is a bad idea, basically. And so everyone's contributions are equal. Then it meant that children could really just open up, do you know what I mean? And just because they could feel there was no judgment in the room, they weren't going to be told this is good or bad. So it's like that's not even a thing anymore. It's like just let's just be. It's just whatever comes out. And you know, it's just sort of made it quite a beautiful thing, really.
Yeah, and I think it was so heartwarming seeing the look on their children's faces. The look on the children's faces as the play is being performed, and they're sat with their parents, and they're, oh, this is one of my ideas. This is my bit. And I think seeing the full circle of them coming up with ideas, and then watching their ideas being realised, and seeing them, you know, accept that, or sort of seeing them see their own ideas have not been rejected and have been used and have been performed and in front of their peers and their schoolmates. And I think it was something really kind of special happened actually on the day.
Mm-hmm. That was kind of for us, Kieran, when we were kind of conceiving of the idea, we kind of, as it is in development, like creating anything really, you know, you're working through all different forms of it, and we'd had like a form of this kind of show, but it was sort of it was all about, you know, get children's ideas and maybe create like a drama scene, and you shoot it like a really committed glossy drama with high-end actors and stuff. We pictured something like that initially, and it was only in trying to strip it back and go, well, how could you do this in a sort of a simpler form, make it more affordable, you know, to make for television. We're like, you know, what's a one-day version of it, you know? And we're like, well, if you did that, then you'd have to do it as a play, and they'd have to come up with the ideas. And we're like, well, that's, sorry, they'd have to put the ideas together very quickly, you know, and formulate a play. You're like, well, that's fun. That's like a time challenge. So that's one thing. But then it was the realization that the children could then watch the play, and that actually, even though it was a late piece to the puzzle, fundamentally became the heart of the whole thing. Because it is in that full circle, as Andy says, that full circle of seeing the children's faces when they see their ideas come alive. That is the beautiful thing about watching this. Like, it's really fun, it's funny, and feel good, but that is like the whole heart of it, and it is so kind of soul nourishing. It's kind of addictive. It's lovely. Like, when we were editing it, we just had the best time. It's the most fun edit we've ever done.
I can imagine. I mean, obviously, neurodivergence is quite a broad, sweeping phrase. Were you in a special school, or was it pupils who are neurodivergent but in a mainstream setting? What was the setup?
Mainstream school. It's Oakham Primary in Tividale in the Black Country in the West Midlands. I'm from the Black Country, and our series producer Ben Mumford is also from the Black Country. So there was a logic to like looking back home, you know, initially, and finding somewhere there, at least for this proof of concept, if you like, because our ambition is obviously to make more episodes of Playtime. And we found Oakham, who were just very forthcoming, you know, really loved the idea. They could see our intention with it, and how all of our efforts are always like children first, you know, and everything we want to do with this with children first. And that was very much in the same ethos as them. And they have a SEND department, but within a wider school. And it was very important for us that the children involved, that it wasn't exclusive either way. So it's not exclusively neurodivergent children involved, as well as it obviously wouldn't be exclusively neurotypical. It was very important that it was a neurodiverse group of children, because I think fundamentally what we need to get away from is the sort of othering and compartmentalization of people, particularly children. And that it should just be children. The only like unifying factor between them is children, and everything else needs to be equally represented, but it shouldn't be relevant to kind of who they are, or certainly whether or not they can join in with something like this.
I mean, some of our listeners will probably listen to a bit of the episode on their drive to work and then pick up the rest on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So afraid of them missing out on the timings and stuff. What channel and what time is this available on the 10th of November?
Yes, of course. So it goes out, it broadcasts on ITV1 on Monday, the 10th of November, but vitally, it's on ITVX from Monday the 10th, from just during the day, and it can be watched at any time from Monday the 10th onwards, and it's also on YouTube. ITV will be hosting it on YouTube as well, so very easy to get hold of.
Fantastic. And they normally stick around for a long time on ITVX, don't they? I think BBC's like a month for live things, but ITVX seems to be like, it's almost like its own digital library kind of thing. Is that the approach they take?
I think that's the plan, yeah. And I think, it should be around for plenty of time for people to catch up on it if they miss it the first time around, yeah.
Yeah, the first of many, I hope. Like I say, how many people will get to the end of any of my episodes? It's probably losing 30% from the very end. So I thought if we wait until then to announce when things are happening, you're going to lose at least some people.
Yeah,
I'll hit that after question.
I should just add that if people do watch on YouTube or indeed on ITVX, if you find some way to leave a public comment, such as like on the YouTube link, if you like the show, please do comment and say, because you think that sort of thing maybe wouldn't actually make a big difference to the grand scheme of things, but it really does. The powers that be do see and look for comments to see how the audience reacts, and if you like it and it's the sort of thing you want to see more of, which is what we're hoping to do, then please do tell us to say, because you might actually be in some small way at least responsible for there being more opportunities for children, like these children, to experience this. So please do send your positive comments. If you didn't really like it, you can just stay quiet. That's probably for the best.
That's what I always say with this podcast. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't tell me. Here at Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, we spend a lot of time exploring what great mathematics teaching looks like. And that's exactly what the story of maths was designed to support. It's a complete curriculum that builds coherence from the earliest concepts to the most complex ideas, weaving representation, reasoning and proof into every lesson. And because it's written by teachers, for teachers, professional development is not a bolt-on. It's part of the fabric of the curriculum itself. Now, schools around the world are already seeing the difference. To find out more, visit alta-education.com/TSOM-overview. As educators, we often talk about the importance of psychological safety and belonging in classrooms. From your perspective, both as filmmakers and participants, what conditions allow the children and comedians to feel safe enough to take creative risks?
Well, I mean, the comedians, they'll always take creative risks, whatever chance they'll get, really, especially the brilliant comedians that we have in Playtime. But for us, it's how the children feel that's like fundamental. That's really important to us, and that they're relaxed and have a great time. So that kind of leads all of our decisions, to be honest. One of the most sort of vital decisions was to have us and the cast visit and meet the children at their school, so that they were in a relaxing and sort of familiar, safe space. So rather than like an independent location, say we could have done it at a theatre and performed on a theatre stage and have the children come to the theatre. Realise that actually by doing it at their school and it all being self-contained, it's like they're on home turf, if you like. It's like a team playing at home. So they've got a nicer, more familiar setting that ultimately made it much more sort of relaxing for them, and surrounded obviously by their teachers, like we always had. One of the teachers at least, present at all times, so for any of the conversations or everything. So they're in a familiar space with people they know, and vitally we would go and meet. So we went and visited school on a couple of occasions beforehand, and the second time we went and specifically met the children, and we sort of just had like a fun creative session, not on camera or anything, just us, the production team, including people in more technical roles that won't necessarily be chatting with the children, but it was really important that everyone was there, so the children got familiar with their faces and got a sense of everyone, and just broke the ice. And we played little fun story games, coming up, kind of doing similar to what they do in the show, coming up with stories and showing that there was nothing to be worried about. There was no wrong answers, and it was just, like fun. So that was a part of our approach anyway.
And then a big part of making them feel comfortable on the day, I think, because often when you're setting a television shoot up, there's a lot of waiting around, and really we didn't want these children. It was during a school day, and they were being taken out of their classroom, to come and do this, and we didn't want them, to be hanging around too long. We know there's a limited amount of attention span, and frustration or boredom can start to creep in. So I think while we were setting the cameras up, one thing we did is we brought them into the adjacent room where we had the monitors set up, and the sound person was there with the headphones and everything. We sort of talked them through. They could see all the cameras that were going to be filming them, and they could see all the crew walking around, and they could hear the microphones, and the sound operator showed them what the boom did, and just sort of made them feel really comfortable with the filmmaking process. So then when they went in the room, they didn't suddenly feel like sort of rabbit in headlights and, could possibly clam up, because I think, we all wanted to get, to make them feel comfortable enough that they could share their stories and share their ideas. And we actually filmed the whole thing in their SEND department. So they have a room called the Den where they do their where the children access their SEND provisions, and that was where we shot the whole thing. So it was an environment that these children were very used to being in.
I mean, that's amazing. You've really gone to great lengths to make sure the children are comfortable, but even getting to see behind the scenes, that was probably just as exciting as being part of the process itself. And imagine, was that sort of in line with their reactions, and were they buzzing to be in there?
Oh yeah, they absolutely loved it. Yeah, and the response we had from the from the teachers, a lot of the children were, when they had done their interview and they kind of going back to the class, and they were absolutely on cloud nine. They're telling all their classmates about everything they did, and all the cameras and the crew. And I think generally a TV crew descending on a school is always going to be exciting in its own way.
But it is interesting, like I noticed a difference even in the last 10, 15 years or so working in the industry, the way that children respond to cameras. And what's made it easy now is that they're much more familiar with them. And there was a time when the sight of a camera was kind of terrifying to a child, and you'd have a lot of work to do there to help them relax, with cameras around them. And we had, when we're filming these conversations, we're shooting 5 cameras, and they've all got an operator. We've got sound there, so that involves the sound operator, a couple of boom operators in there. So that's already 8 people before myself, the director. So there's quite a lot of people that are in the room. But they're not bothered. They're not bothered by these cameras. And I think part of that is some familiarity with cameras, and because of like social media and everyone having cameras on their phones now, they're much more used to being around them. But also the efforts we made to get them familiar, with the team and the crew, and just help them relax. They met all the cast before, like our comedians met them before they sat down to have these conversations. We took them that morning, and they had a good chat with all the kids, and just in a relaxed setting, nothing, formal. And that helped break the ice a bit there, and showed us a little bit about who had good chemistry between the children and the comedians, and who might, bounce off each other in quite a fun way and stuff, So it's, it was great.
If you're trying to keep up with artificial intelligence without losing your Sundays, subscribe to Teacher Prompts by Neil Almond. It's a weekly AI briefing for teachers, a quick scan of what matters, classroom-ready prompt to try, and plain English explainers of the latest features. It's free, written with teachers in mind. Sign up at news.teacherprompts.ai. So you've worked on projects such as the Assembly and now Playtime, with which both foreground neurodivergent voices. Is there anything these experiences have taught you about how mainstream media represents neurodiversity, and what perhaps still needs to change? I mean, that's almost taking it from a deficit point of view. If there is no deficit point of view, then perhaps that's fine.
It's definitely getting much better. I think the Assembly and Playtime are helping to remove the othering that neurodivergence has typically received in the past. There's been an explosion of diagnoses at the moment, and as a lot of us know, the NHS can't keep up. And I think it's because we're beginning to realise that it's much more commonplace than previously thought. And the old-fashioned stereotypes and images of autism, dyslexia, ADHD, they need to be corrected with opportunities to show how neurodivergence is actually normal. When we do that in both the assembly and Playtime, by neither of them are really being, because neither of the shows are really about neurodivergence. As in, that's not the subject matter. It's just people are involved who are neurodivergent, and sometimes that might crop up in conversation, but it's not fundamentally the subject matter, and that's what helps sort of normalize it. Both of those shows are just about people, humans connecting to each other. The assembly is like beautifully raw, and it's like humanity. It sort of strips away the sheen of celebrity and showcases a group of people relating on a personal kind of human level about love, loss, like hopes and dreams. While Playtime sort of builds on that, like we were saying, it sort of builds a lot on the same principle of like human connection that the assembly has, but now this is like through the eyes of children and cross generations collaborating creatively in a way that they never usually would, which allows like children the opportunity to see their creativity brought to life in a way that they never usually would. And some of those children are neurodivergent, some are not, and we don't ever say who is. There's a couple of occasions in Playtime you'll see where it's explicit from what a child says, and in one case, one of the comedians openly talk about them both being diagnosed autistic and their sort of shared experiences on that, which is fascinating to see from such two completely different generations. One of them a late stage autism diagnosis, and the other obviously a child that's growing up with that diagnosis, and feeling and seeing the differences in those generations is really fascinating. But ultimately you don't know who is diagnosed with what, or indeed whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, and the beauty is that it doesn't matter, because like I mentioned before, they're all just children, and broader than that, it's all just people connecting. And I think that's what helps to normalize it. The more we can create shows where it's not important, the more I think the better it'll get.
Terminology and attitudes and stuff move on so quickly, but I'm pretty sure there's an argument that neurotypical is a bit of a misnomer, because really what is typical? It's like the old what is normal, because obviously we know that normal doesn't exist by a long shot. So that it almost in some respects makes me feel bad for making sort of the fact that the comedians are neurodivergent and some of the children are neurodivergent the focus of our conversation, but hopefully listeners can see past that. That's just the limitations of my skill as an interviewer, rather than my approach to this element of life. Because the othering really stands out, because that is the issue, or certain feels like to me, when groups are represented on television. The focus is not what you guys are proposing. You guys are proposing that it's humans and story first, whereas in the past it's been, here's this person who is different from us, in inverted commas, that kind of thing. So I think that's a really powerful message. A long way of saying, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, no, but still, I agree with you, by the way, about the way that these things are categorized. I think we're still learning an awful lot. I have it on good authority that the first diagnosis of autism and ADHD together, a combined diagnosis, didn't happen until 2013, which is much, much later than you would have thought. And obviously, autism has been, Asperger's has been recategorized in recent years into autism, and obviously autism being just separated into levels of support needs, and so we're constantly reevaluating what these terms are, what they mean, what falls into what category. And I mean, like even ADHD, a lot of people don't like the D of the second D, I should say, of ADHD, because it's in some way suggests that it's a problem or something wrong, when it's not about that. It's just about a brain type. It's just the way that those brains work. So I think it will just keep evolving, but it's great to keep talking about it. And I think it's still important to reference, like you are referencing, that there are neurodivergent people in the show, and it's a neurodiverse group of children. That's still important to reference, even if we don't necessarily specify people individually in terms of what their label or diagnosis is, because that just helps keep the conversation going, keeping people talking about it, which is really important.
And it obviously is a big part of the show. And I think one of the hopes, when I watched it, I watched an early cut with my wife and son. And my son is in the process of getting a diagnosis. Obviously, it takes a couple of years on the NHS, but we're well down the route of getting that. And really interestingly, one of the children in the show talks about how they talk different, and they his words were, I talk weirdly. I have a weird way of talking. And after I'd watched it with my wife and son, he had related to that child, and he said, "Oh, I talk differently. I talk weirdly, just like he described. That's how I talk." And it began a conversation with my son about his neurodivergence. And I think one of our hopes is that it's something that parents can watch with their children, and it might help start a conversation that they haven't yet been able to have, or didn't know how to access or get into. I think often people talk when they've got a shared thing to look at. People have deep conversations in cars when they're both looking at the road ahead, right? And I think having something that you can use to bounce off of and start a conversation can give you an entry point into what some people might find difficult conversations with their children.
Yeah, and that's going to be massive, particularly now with sort of SND funding being a massive political football, and the way politics is at the minute, it's going to be quite adversarial, can't it? And having this opportunity for real people to have real conversations, I think is immensely powerful to cut through the noise, I suppose, is the polite way of saying it.
Yes.
Yes.
Cut through. If you've ever finished an episode of Thinking Deeply about primary education and wanted to go further, to read more, think more, and connect ideas, hey, what you reading for is exactly where you should start. Each week, we curate the best thinking from across education, books that challenge assumptions, research that informs practice, and podcasts that broaden perspectives. From curriculum and pedagogy to sound leadership and international insights, it's your weekly companion for meaningful professional growth. And because we know teachers are time poor but enthusiasm rich, it's concise, evidence-informed, and genuinely useful. Subscribe for free at thinkingdeeply.info. Now, I obviously don't want to go full Marvel and give away all the spoilers before we get to the episode, but if any teachers are listening, which I'm sure most of us are teachers, and they're thinking about creating a more inclusive space for their students, were there any lessons or moments from the filming process that might translate into classroom practice? And I know that might be a bit of a leap, but almost like, is there anything anecdotally that you guys think really stood out to you?
You have any thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, I think I think the comedians in the cast that we chose all have a very strong improv background, and there's a real ethos in improv comedy of yes and. So you always say yes, and you always build on something that someone else. You never block. If you're doing improv with another person, you never block something that they've come up with. You always build on it and take it to the next level. And so I think all of our cast approached it in that sort of improv way, and I think that's something that really helped the children tell their stories and come up with their characters and their ideas. Is this idea of like we said before, there is no right or wrong answer. They're just their answers, their ideas. It's creative, and I think giving them the chance to yes and on top of their ideas, I think really helped bring a lot out of the children. And I'd say that was something that people can put into practice. I certainly I with my son, when we're on walks and things, we're always coming up with stories and ideas. I think being a writer, I just can't help kind of creating and writing stories with him. And I think so we've got this long list of imaginary characters, half of them woodland characters, and all sorts. And I think something I'm always trying to do with him is to yes and his ideas, but also give them. I think a lot of his good ideas come from giving him problems to solve. I think rather than just going to these children saying, right, come up with a character. What do they do? I think it's sort of too open-ended, and I think what we found that got the best results from the children, creativity-wise, was to give them problems and obstacles that they needed to overcome. And I think that's what kind of sparked some of their ideas. Is go, okay, what would your character do if this problem happened, or they came up against this obstacle? And that's when the children were like, oh, they'd do this, and the ideas they come up with will be so far-fetched that an adult would never think of. And then that was where we kind of found the joy in their ideas, I think.
Yeah, I think that emphasis on there being no right or wrong is absolutely vital. It has to be a judgment-free zone, like no idea is a bad idea type atmosphere, because then all that matters is the freedom of expression.
Yeah, because the thing that comes to mind, like from an adult perspective, is letting perfect be the enemy of good. And as an adult, that could be a real blocker, can't it? Where you want something to be so good, and I imagine the children wanted it to be really good. So creating that environment, where actually everything's a work in progress. When I think about my maths classroom, it's not the answer. Actually, getting things wrong gives me more to do as a teacher. This is better for me. And it must be similar with okay, we've got an idea here, but how can we make this even better? It feels like a really good way to approach things. And that'd be really interesting to see how this develops on Monday. You've described Playtime as being close to your heart, because of your own late diagnosis. How has understanding your own neurodivergence shaped the way you see learning, communication, creativity, both on screen and in everyday life?
Yeah, so I suppose this is for me because I've been diagnosed as autistic in later life, which has made a lot more sense of things for me in the past. My childhood, a quick crash course is actually I've had very good parents who were always so encouraging of all of me and my brothers being very different to each other, that I think that was largely why I went without a diagnosis, because when I would want to have my own table in a restaurant, and not because I'd fallen out with my family or anything, I just wanted to sit at my own table, they somehow just embraced this and said that's fine in a range, which is outrageous in my mind that they would do that. They were just incredibly sort of they were incredible at putting up with those sorts of things. And I actually only last night was reminded by my brother of something I'd completely forgotten that I used to do, which was when we'd be leaving for school every day, I would have to say goodbye to each of the cats. And I'd have to give them a stroke and say goodbye to each cat individually, which you think would be fine, but we had 15 at the time. So he said that they would all be stood by the front door, and my mum and dad would be going, "Dean, we've got to go," and I'd be like legging it up and down the stairs, going, "Wait, I can't find Flan. I can't find him anywhere," and really freaking out. So I said goodbye to them all, and I'd completely forgot about that. But it was it's made a lot of sense for me personally, of aspects of my childhood and indeed of my adult life. And I mean, it's a sort of a tough question, really. I guess it's helped me realise how many people of like my generation and older grew up without fully understanding this huge like part of ourselves. So the more that we can keep like raising awareness of and normalizing neurodivergence, allowing the access needed for people and children, obviously in particular, of all brain types, and like the easier it will be for children to embrace like being themselves and lead and happy, fulfilled lives, I suppose.
It must take immense bravery to even go anywhere near the diagnosis process. later in life? I mean, it's almost, I don't know. I'd be quite worried myself. I mean, what was that experience like?
Yeah, it's a bit. It's odd because it's like a sense. Well, we all have to. We all formulate our identities, don't we? And identities in who we are as, like in work. What's the job I do? What's my career? What's, am I a father? Am I a husband? Am I a football fan? Like, am I a fan of Aston Villa? Whoever it might be. We all formulate these identities, and like I'm 42 now. I was 41 when I got the official diagnosis, and it's a big reevaluation of an identity. So it was sort of intimidating. The reason I did it, and why I'd say anyone out there who is in a similar position and a bit intimidated at the idea of a diagnosis, and maybe that puts you off trying to get one, is that actually it's just really useful for understanding yourself. You might think, well, but I'm in my 40s now. I've got used to my life, living my life. I've worked out how I do things, why. But it simplifies a lot of things. A big part of the reason for me was difficulties my wife would often have with me in not knowing, because there were certain things, behaviours and stuff I do that she would have fundamentally understood better had she known that it was based on that. And if we were like, okay, you're autistic, therefore it could equal this, this, and this, and that's why you do that. That's why I have such a need for a strict routine. That's why there's only certain spoons I like to use. And there's loads of spoons in the drawer I hate using, and it would often be, why do you need that one? Like, that's the one I'm using. I'm like, do you mind? I just really want that. Just odd things like that. That you could just go, oh yeah, that'll be because of that, and then it's suddenly so much easier. And that's one of the lighter examples. There's obviously a much more complicated aspect, and so that it's kind of brought a freedom in knowing yourself better. And actually, it hasn't changed my identity. It's just helped make sense of certain aspects of who I am, because you realise that just because you weren't aware of it doesn't mean it wasn't your identity. Like fundamentally, anyone who's neurodivergent has been like that since birth. It's not something that's caused by any environmental factors or nurturing factors, as has often been theorized over the years, and has been disproven by science every single time. That is, it's fundamentally from birth. It's genetic, so it has always been part of who I am. I just didn't know, and that's the best way to think about it, really.
It's for other people. That's why I asked, not to pry into your personal life.
No.
As soon as I asked about, this is an immensely personal question to ask, but I'm thinking of listeners who are perhaps thinking, about themselves and whether or not it might be something they want to pursue. And because we don't talk about mental health half as well as we should do. We don't talk about what's going on in our lives half as well as we should do. And if we can make space in this podcast for people to think and go, actually, this might be something I consider, and taking away that fear maybe the first step, because I think as teachers, we like to put a lot of things on our shoulders and maybe don't give ourselves enough time. I mean, it's half term when we're recording this, and it'll be the only time that people have got the chance to go to the dentist and that kind of thing. And what we want, so we want our teachers to look after themselves first and foremost.
Yeah.
And that is, and I think this conversation plays a big part of that, I think.
Yeah. I think you're right. The emphasis on mental health, like talking about mental health, is so important, and it all ties into that, because if you have a neurodivergency you're not aware of, it probably is affecting your mental health in quite a serious way, even if you don't kind of realize it, because it's all of these micro stresses and confusions, that adding to it. That was certainly the case for me, and as adults, it's really important to talk about it, but in particular as men, and men talking to other men about mental health. We're entering a potentially quite like a fork in the road, a crux moment in society wise, with a lot of the influences young boys have in particular, from the Andrew Tates and the like, and it's really important that we go down the right path at this juncture. And I think normalizing that it's very masculine to talk about your feelings, and that that's not an effeminate thing in any way. That is ultimately masculine to be able to talk about your feelings with confidence. That's the tide we need to turn, really, or to steer, to make sure we're going down the right road.
Yeah, 100%. And shows like Playtime, I think, definitely play a role, and I'm looking forward to watching. What are your plans for the future as a collective, and what are we likely to see coming on our television screens?
Well, more Playtime, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're very ambitious to make more Playtime. We'd love to make a series traveling around the country, I think, and making it quite regional. So sort of doing episodes and celebrating each of the kind of outer regions, and not just trying to. I mean, this was shot in the Midlands in our first one, but not a lot of television's made in London. It's nice. It'd be nice to make a sort of regional thing, and I think also as a format, it will work very well internationally. I think I'd be really interested to see what other countries, what schools and what children and what comedians from other countries would do with the same idea. To be honest.
Yeah, we're sort of on a mission. It all boils down to, really, it's a mission to listen to children. Because as a format, as a show, the whole thing is about listening to children, and it's a way to be able to listen to children who, through whatever social barriers they might have, might otherwise never be heard. Certainly not on a platform like this. Like broadcasting on television. So that's what we want to do. And so if certainly, as so many of your listeners will be teachers and working in education. If you watch Playtime and you like it, and it's the sort of thing you'd be interested in being involved with in a series, and we actively encourage you, to get in touch. It's great to know what schools or institutions would be interested in talking more. We'd love to hear from them for sure.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I think we've got all corners of the UK covered, all corners of the globe covered. You happy for me to put your email address, Céin, in the show notes? Because yours, it's like almost like your official email address, isn't it? Actually, both email addresses weren't your personal email addresses.
No, that's right. Yeah,
that's true.
If I stick both of those in, people can get in touch, because they've cut me out of the process. And like, I've got lots of friends who've been on the show and they're saying, "Oh, people just got in touch with me directly. They're ignoring me as the host now, and just gone straight to the source." So expect to be inundated. What's the list in possibilities? Because I'm thinking, there are teachers in Germany who'd be interested in this, teachers in parts of Southeast Asia. Is ITVX global? I mean, you might not be the right people to ask this. Is it globally available, or do they need a VPN?
So yeah, it won't be globally available yet. So we have a distribution company, Hat Trick International, who will be across trying to get Playtime, into other territories, which will include hopefully our version of Playtime, the UK version, broadcasting other territories, but also Playtime being made in those countries, homegrown shows in those countries too. Not that I would officially condone it, but VPNs are available if people would like to see them, would like to see the show. But because for us, the most important thing is that this goes on and gets picks up steam, and that more and more children get to be heard. Because that's what our goal is. That's what's so soul nourishing for us. Making it because you as Andy, I'm sure will agree. We've made a lot of television over the years. A lot of it very proud of. A lot of it sometimes to pay the bills. And it's so lovely to be able to make something that is like a legacy. Something that could be a real legacy, because it makes a difference. It improves people's lives in some way. It's not often you get to make something like that in television. So we're throwing everything behind this, really.
That sounds fantastic, and it's been lovely talking to you about it today. And I'm sure listeners are really looking forward to getting to watch it on Monday. and then they're going to go straight away and they're going to add their comments and their positive comments.
Yes, please.
Where possible. And, I doubt we've got any Daily Mail readers and comment section people listening to this podcast. But all I said to do is say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, Céin.
It's a pleasure, Kieran. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Kieran. It's been a joy.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.